The following episode was originally recorded for a private podcast as part of the Equipped for Life course. It has been edited for public release, but may reference training material from the Equipped for Life course. So Rachel just came back from her first solo speaking and outreach tour, and we just threw her in instead of because it ended up being this multi-leg thing where you went to Oregon to do the Oregon Right to Life conference.
Yeah.
Which thank you very much for doing that, because I had just been in Ohio for a week, and at the time I was like, I don't think this is a really good idea for me to do it. And now looking back, I'm like, oh, I'm so glad I did not literally get back to go to the airport and fly to Oregon. It would not have been good. So I'm really glad you did the Oregon Right to Life conference. And then you went straight to Pennsylvania because there's this awesome club in, how do you pronounce the school?
So that's the mystery of the whole thing. How do you pronounce their name? I think, okay, so after talking with the students, I think it's Kutztown University.
Really?
Kutztown, yeah. Which I was calling it Cooztown. We had Kazoo Town. We had a lot of nicknames.
Here, my assistant Jen and I were privately calling it Cuzco University whenever we were talking about it. No offense to the awesome club at apparently Kutztown. And just it was kind of a funny thing for us. No one on our staff could ever remember what was the actual name of the university.
I wonder if they would find that kind of thing to be derogatory.
I hope not.
No, I told them, and they thought it was funny.
It was all meant in, a non-derogatory way. I don't know what the word is exactly for what it was
Playful,
meant for, but
good-natured,
yeah,
all those things.
It was an ambitious trip, I think, with the time zones and everything. I'm a little bit too ambitious, maybe. I don't know, but I'm excited that
Rachel.
I'm excited that I was able to go, my first official staff speaking trip. And Josh has been to the Right to Life of Oregon conference
three times, I think.
Something
I
like
think
that.
I've done it 3 times now.
People knew you. They were like, oh, is this the Josh thing? I'm like, yep.
It's the Josh thing.
What do I
is
say
that worse than Brom Bros, Tim, or is that better?
I mean, worse in the sense of us wanting ERI to not just be the Josh Brom show.
Yeah.
So sure, in that sense. In terms of exclusionary branding, though, at least Brom Bros gets a couple of us.
So, yeah, and I ran into several people who had heard you speak in the past, and they were asking, are you giving the same talk? Are you giving a different talk? And so that was kind of cool. And so I talked on bodily rights, and then I gave a practical dialogue tips talk. And I got to kind of interact at the conference throughout the day at the booth with some of our donors and some of the people who listened to the podcast. So that was really cool.
Nice.
That's fun.
Yeah. There was a kind of a local group, United for Life. So I got to hang out with a couple of their staff. They were really nice throughout the day. So, also one of the guys that I was with in my Wilberforce fellowship through Students for Life of America, his mom was next to me. So we got to hang out and talk about, hi, Johnny. We got to talk about him.
Gosh.
And he's hoping to maybe go into pro-life work. So that was really cool.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
And then you went to Pennsylvania.
And then I went to Pennsylvania, and that group was really fun to work with. And their university, something's in the water, but those students were open-minded because I've never had so many people change their minds at an outreach like I did those 2 days.
That's awesome.
Oh yeah. It was incredible. So they didn't do the traditional polling table like we usually do. They did more of a sticker board. So they had should abortion remain legal, and then students can put a dinosaur sticker or whatever.
Is that a metaphor for something?
No, it was a real dinosaur. It was fun. They had fun stickers.
I was assuming it was an actual dinosaur sticker. I'm asking if the dinosaur sticker is a metaphor.
No.
Okay.
And they kind of put a fun sticker.
Carnivores and herbivores.
No, I think they're trying to get people to subtly think of Ian Malcolm. You guys are so focused on whether or not you think you could.
No.
You just stop to think if you should.
Good reference. Excellent.
No, it was you get to stick a sticker and then you get to take one to go. And I was I wish we had the I voted stickers. That'd be kind of cool. But they were we were giving out free stickers.
Put them on their shirt, just kind of I participated in the thing.
Yeah.
Oh, that's interesting.
That would be really cool. That's a thought I had at the table because even college students, they like stickers. They're I'll put a sticker on my backpack.
It's true. We go to conferences hey, you have any stickers? They want stick stickers everywhere.
And so so we had the yes it depends and no. And it's surprising because when we have the notepads and people can come write down their thoughts, we see very few people pick it depends. Usually you see them like split and then you talk with them and they aren't an extremist, but they like somehow feel forced into yes or no. But with stickers, it's not. Like, we saw a lot of it depends. It was very well balanced between the three options. So there's something psychological, I think.
Because they're not putting their name maybe.
Something. But like, when I say these students were open-minded, like kind of more low-hanging fruit, I had a student come up to the table. This is the second day. She takes a sticker and she's like standing there looking at all the stickers and thinking. And like, I give her a beat. And then it goes like 10 seconds and she's still there just kind of looking. And so I came up to her. I said, hey, like, let me know what's going on in your mind right now. Like, where do you want to put your sticker? Are you totally undecided? She's like, it's really hard. This is a tough issue. I don't know what I think.
Wow.
So I talked with her for like maybe 25 minutes and we go through, various things. And she signed up for Students for Life.
Wow.
On their email list. She's like, I'm joining the club. I was like, dang.
Yeah.
So we usually don't see people that committed walking away, but I had several people like signing up for Students for Life, moving their stickers after they voted. That is like a really cool thing to see.
How do they move the stickers? Like, isn't that like
the stickers were coming off pretty easily.
Okay, good. I was gonna say, it's just like a problem with the sticker thing, but apparently if you get stickers that are not super sticky, then...
Yeah, and so like that was really cool to see. And I got to like work with the students, even though it's just me and them, but like because we had several students at the table, they can have a conversation, I can listen in, and then pull them aside. And this is one of the wonderful things about us being able to go to campus and work with them. It's like we pull them aside and say, okay, how did that conversation go? Okay, when you trotted out a toddler, you skipped brace her for the weird question. How do you feel about that? Do you feel like you needed to do that? Or was it okay that you skipped it? Like working through the specifics, that was awesome. And I had the students tell me, like, one of them texted me, this was one of the most rewarding experiences of my life. And I was like,
wow,
that's so cool.
And then, okay, these students, I know what it's like to bring a speaker to your campus. It's a lot of work. They worked their butts off to get people to attend my talk. And we had a pretty good sized crowd and a lot of pro-choice people.
That's great.
Yeah, including what I later found out was like a philosophy club. So this group of guys, maybe like 8 of them, showed up. They were a little bit early. And what's really cool is before the talk, I was able to joke around with them about John Mulaney, which we found out.
Nice.
We found out like we shared our favorite comedian. And
do you know about the new subreddit Unexpected Mulaney?
No.
There's a subreddit for this where like anytime like someone comes across a thing that is like similar to something John Mulaney talks about, like someone recently just yesterday put a picture from like they're in college and there's like a PowerPoint from some like women's studies class and it like quotes what is the name of the lady's name? It's like I think she's a lesbian, and they're like extra credit.
Emily Dickinson.
Dickinson.
Oh
So they
my
like
gosh.
literally it's like an Emily Dickinson quote, and then it puts like poet and lesbian. It's like her identification. It's like Unexpected Mulaney. And then everyone kind of goes back and forth and quotes it. Yeah,
I need to check that out. But like we had, and so this jovial time almost built so much rapport between me and the guys. Like they had been retweeted by Nick Kroll, and so like they're like showing me the tweet, and like we're talking about like and they had like dressed up as like Gil and George, which is John Mulaney and Nick Kroll's like Broadway show. Like they were showing me all these pictures, and later I find out after they asked me all these tough questions during Q&A, and I mean they were very strong pro-choice people. They had looked up ERI. They had like watched some of our videos. They had read our papers.
This is becoming a more common experience for us. Like we gotta be careful what we put out.
Yeah,
I'm careful. That's my job.
No, I mean
the fact I just gotta say this: the fact that even though those aggressive students were coming after you, trying to find something, and they didn't find anything, I'm a little proud of that.
Yeah.
I have cut off a lot of potential problems from getting on our website.
Good work, Tim.
It was such a good experience, and they like wanted to hang out. We hung out maybe 15 minutes after the Q&A and just talked more philosophy and it's a great experience to have people go into the room kind of on edge, and then afterwards
they weren't just kind of they weren't just kind of on edge. Like you've missed a part of the story about how like what was the atmosphere on campus about this talk? People were mad.
People were so
because
angry.
you know, like I made the club a flyer for the event. I don't know if that flyer ever got used. Like I had a graphic designer actually make a template where like we can change out like the place and location and who's the speaker or whatever. But like generally it's like it's all set up. It looks nice, you know, because like this is basically the only talk we give on college campuses right now. Like this is like obviously the best talk we can do on a college campus. But the college apparently made their own flyer just gratis, and that was getting posted around. And someone in the admin, I hear, made kind of a mistake when they made the flyer.
So both flyers were used.
Okay.
So I think the students had made like another flyer that was more like a pretty graphic and had like a word bubble, like my body, my choice. And so they were putting them up like together. So one had like more information and one was like larger to try to get attention or something. And then, the people who were like in the admin office had printed saying like the normal disclaimer, but the normal disclaimer says that the university helped fund the event, or like the student affair group or whatever.
Which they did not.
Which they did not, and we cleared up. But like people were angry, and it was online on Facebook, like ranting about how could our university allow this person to come. And
which, by the way, that's not like if that's your initial response is how can the university let a speaker I don't like come here? Like you need to check yourself.
The leftist speakers are brought by the university, paid a lot of money by the university all the time.
And you know, people are like donating to Planned Parenthood on behalf of me, but it's like okay, 2 objections.
You just start getting all these like letters from Planned Parenthood every month. Here's what we're doing now.
Well, like okay,
I know.
First of all, it's like $5, and secondly, they spelled my name wrong. They spelled my name wrong, and that makes me more angry than anything. Okay, it's a pet peeve for
the
like
first
Rachel.
name or last name?
Rachel. They spelled it with like
A-E-L?
A-E-L. Yeah.
Isn't that the less normal way to spell it?
Yeah, right?
It's a debate. It's a debate among Rachels.
I would think if you were a Rach-A-L person and they spelled it Rach-L, then that would seem like more reasonable or just what you would expect.
I get it all the time, though. Like, I've had people misspell my name all the time. They also assume my nickname is Rach, and I've never gone by Rach. I've never liked Rach.
Is that a thing?
Oh, it's such a
I've
thing.
heard that.
It's such a thing.
Man.
I think it's on Friends. I think they
sure,
call Rachel from Friends.
I'm
Rach.
pretty sure, like, yeah, exactly. That's kind of where it started, and it's haunted me my whole life. Yeah, so I've never gone by Rach. I do go by Ray. That's my nickname, but I've never gone, like, R-A-E.
Yeah.
But I've never gone by Rach, and people call me it all the time, and I'm not angry anymore. But misspelling my name when you donate because of me to Planned Parenthood, like, at least do me that respect.
Get my name right. Did you go by Ray before or after Force Awakens came out?
Way before. Like,
okay.
This was like more
They took it
13,
from you.
14. Yeah, age 13, 14.
At least you're not a Mary Sue.
Yeah, right? Let's not go into
Couldn't
Star
resist.
Wars. But, and we had a professor making a whole storm on Facebook too, which is pretty interesting. But, yeah.
Professor of what?
I don't know what she was a professor of.
Okay.
Some people were saying it was women's studies, but I don't want to say that and because I don't know for sure.
All right.
But we had this girl, very feminist, very angry. I was there. She had come in late, and I could see her, you know, come in, and she's like standing up by the balcony. And one of the guys from the crowd, a pro-life student, asked, "What do I say when women tell me I shouldn't have an opinion about abortion and shouldn't speak about it?" And I said, "You should shut your mouth." And then I paused, and I was like, "Just kidding. Here's what you should say." It got such a good reaction from the crowd. Like, it was a killer joke. I don't know.
So it's an edgy, risky joke.
Yeah.
It's fun that it landed.
So then I go through
great.
like Tim's like trotting out a toddler with the lake and the postpartum depression, and I see her fuming at the top.
Wow.
And she raised her hand to respond to what I had just said, and she went through kind of a polite but very emotionally angry, you know, rant about how she felt like that thought experiment was totally unfair because the toddler and the unborn are not the same. So after her kind of angry rant, I responded with, here's what trot out a toddler can do for us, and here's what it doesn't argue. And I like, I got very excited and animated in my response to her because I was like, I'm so glad you said that. Because I'm sure that there are other people like in the room right now who are thinking the same thing. And I think it's a great objection to bring up. So here's, and so then I went into like, here's what I'm trying to do with the tool.
Mhm.
I'm trying to see where we agree and where we disagree.
Hmm.
So when he does this in the conversation as the guy, he's hoping that the pro-choice girl who's, kind of accusing him maybe of trying to control women or whatnot, he's trying to affirm that concern and respond to, I agree with you that this has happened in the past, like men have tried to control women. That's not what I'm trying to do here. Let me explain what I'm trying to do with this thought experiment. Now you can speak about the unborn, the moral status, and how you think the unborn is not like a toddler and he thinks it is morally, and focus the conversation.
Wow.
She came up to me afterwards and was like, that is the best thing I've ever heard a pro-life person say. No,
Wow.
So cool.
She was only there for like the very end because she had to work until like halfway through my talk. But
Right.
Super,
it was
super
really
cool.
cool. It was really cool.
Great job.
I've got a question that I want to ask.
Sure.
And this is not on our podcast agenda. So you had all of these experiences at Outreach, positive experiences, seeing minds change, talking
Mhm.
to people that we call low-hanging fruit, which I
Mhm.
don't think is derogatory either.
It's not.
But what we mean by that is
Open-minded.
people that are kind of open-minded and like somewhat easy to persuade.
Mhm.
You and I had a conversation before your trip, Rachel, where we talked about if we're on campus,
Mhm.
who should we be trying to talk to? Should we be trying to find the low-hanging fruit and convince them? Should we put our energy into that, or should we invest our energy into harder to convince people on the grounds that if you do convince them, even though it's harder and less likely, you can have even more good come from that. Like those are people that are influencing people to be pro-choice in their sphere and all that kind of thing. So there's we had this whole lengthy discussion. We broke out my whiteboard for the first time. We were diagramming like charts and things. It was really interesting discussion. We
I
got
don't know
into a lot of
about
stuff.
any of this.
I know.
Yeah,
it was
well-
so cool. Sorry.
It was a really interesting discussion. We
What
could
did you
get
figure
more
out?
into that. But the main takeaway from that is like Rachel and I have somewhat different strategies on
Mhm.
campus.
Oh, interesting.
So for me, like my attitude on cost benefit analysis, how are we going to end abortion? If we just get everyone from the mushy middle onto our side, like it's over, we win. Which is part of the reason why I'm so passionate about trying to, as I've said, make the comfortable pro-choice position extinct. So like refer to the how bodily rights arguments require extremism.
Right.
Like if we just get that message out there, that gets a lot of the mushy middle people on our side.
Yeah.
And that's a huge, huge deal.
I'm going to link to that article. If you haven't read that article,
Yeah.
you have to read that article. It's one of the most important ones on our blog.
Yeah. And so given that, and like the likelihood of a really skilled pro-life dialoguer changing one of those mushy middle minds, like we can get a lot of good done. We can bring a lot of people over to our side with little energy. Whereas talking to the like super extreme feminist, pro-choice, women's studies people who are just like super, super extreme in their abortion position, like it's not to say we don't accomplish anything. And we have on some occasions actually seen impact.
Mm-hmm.
But the cost benefit analysis, in my view, doesn't come out to be as good as talking to the low-hanging fruit. Rachel, I want you to like kind of share your perspective on your position.
Mhm.
My question is, after having this outreach, has your position changed at all since our conversation?
So just for the audience, during our conversation, I kind of made an argument that I'm more likely to go after the tougher people because, and this is going to sound a little strange, but someone with my experience, talents, arguments, the resources I have available, I think I'm able to have an impact on them, where someone who is, never talked to a pro-choice person before, college freshman or something, like I feel like they don't have as much of a chance to kind of make an impact.
Absolutely.
So I really don't mean that in an arrogant way. I just mean like this is what I have available to me.
Right.
And so I'm more likely to go after the really tough person. And one of the reasons I feel like in the cost benefit analysis, it is important for me to do so is because I see them as being contagious. They're not just sitting in their extreme abortion view. They're affecting others, and they're bringing others from the mushy middle and trying to create more extremists. That's what I've seen in my life. And I have a personal call to help like the one who's out there who's just so far. Because I have that like personal call, like Tim and I kind of came to an agreement that like,
I
personal,
totally respect personal calls.
personal calls, like it justifies the cost benefit analysis. But for like the average pro-life person,
Not the average, almost every pro-life person,
for almost every
in my view
pro-life
anyway.
person, it is much more worth your energy to try to put it in to the mushy middle or those who are just a little bit, grounded, not the activist, hardcore
Right.
women's studies major with the purple hair.
And so to clarify, hypothetically, suppose I'm at an outreach and I've got one kind of newbie volunteer and we're kind of working together. We see two people coming towards us. We're going to engage both of them in conversation. One of them is the purple hair, like super abortion extremist. One of them is a mushy middle person. Okay, so this volunteer has enough training that they can do decently with the new person, and they're going to struggle probably against the extremists. So in that situation, I think like a reasonable divide and conquer.
Right.
I'll handle the extremists so they can talk to the mushy middle person and just have a better experience, have a better conversation. And that's going to be valuable to them in general, and like having them be encouraged. So like that's like something like that would be an exception. But if I'm just like by myself, okay, there's plenty of opportunities walking by. I can either try to grab the extremist and bring them to the table, or grab a mushy middle person. Like hypothetically, I've got this magic knowledge of how extreme people are. I absolutely would go for the mushy middle person.
And there's a lot of complex things that we discussed in the conversation that I don't want to really go into right now. But I will say, after this outreach, I just naturally encountered a lot of people that were in the middle.
Yeah.
Or identified as pro-choice, but just needed some great responses to their concerns. And that's what I was able to give them. And so I had a lot of minds change. I would say, I think, over the 2 days, I maybe had 8 people change their mind.
Wow.
Which is
Great.
so many. Like,
Yeah, that's great.
in real life, usually you have maybe one at an outreach or 2. It depends on who you talk to. I stand by what I said.
That's really
I do
interesting.
stand by what I said. I think that my cost benefit analysis for my personal call and situation is reasonable and accurate and true. I don't know what I should be doing.
My question isn't intended to imply that I think that it wasn't reasonable or anything.
Yeah.
But it's interesting how like having an experience like that in some cases could cause someone to rethink a little bit.
I think it feels really good, and it feels like you're getting results when you have people change their mind at the table. But I'm not doing this for that feeling or whatever. I'm trying to
Personal call.
right.
So let's go ahead and jump into our listener mail then.
Yeah, we've got multiple questions. So this is a quick one from Rich, who said, when you guys are preparing to trot out a toddler, like in Module 3, you have a phrase that goes something like, I have this really weird view. And you go on to state that you believe the unborn have the same moral status as any other human. It sounds a little bit off to me to say that your own view is really weird. Clearly, you don't think that your own view is weird. In fact, you've come to this point of view after untold hours of reflection on the subject. So it isn't that you think your own view is really weird in the sense that it is unreasonable. You do have other weird views in the sense that you're in the extreme minority, like thinking the best way to construct a peanut butter and chocolate chip sandwich is making a 5x5 grid.
I didn't say that wasn't weird.
But I don't think that viewing the moral status of the unborn is this kind of a weird view. Consequently, to me, it sounds disingenuous to start this part of the dialogue in this manner. I think you risk losing credibility by saying your own view is so weird. I don't have a clear recommendation on how this should be rewarded, but I suspect that there are several alternatives that wouldn't require major changes to how this is presented. I'm pretty nitpicky about wording, so this could be a non-issue for nearly everyone you encounter, but maybe it could make a difference every once in a while. What do you think? So I'm just going to say that's just a misstatement. So there's at least one time where I have actually said, I have this really weird view instead of what I'm meaning to say, which is I have this view that's going to sound weird to you.
Yeah, but what's in the course, what I actually say is I have a really weird view.
Oh.
And it's probably the same in the PDF because I wrote it, and that phrasing is a very Tim personality kind of phrasing. So I'm not being disingenuous in saying what I'm saying. I think that for a lot of pro-choice people, the idea that this like little fuzzy orange like tiny thing at conception is a full person, like there is something that's unintuitive about that. I think it's unintuitive. So if you were to do like a Men in Black like light flashy thing and like erase people's memories of ethics and like all of their ethical conversations and abortion conversations, and just say, okay, here's a lineup of things, which of these are persons? You wouldn't look at the fuzzy orange like zygote thing, even if you knew exactly what it was, probably, and say baby.
Right.
Like, I think that it is, because I think that that's the best moral reasoning. I think that what makes us valuable is not what we look like. But it's pretty natural to let what people look like affect how we think of them. That's just kind of how we are. And so that's what I mean by that. So that's very Tim personality. You can rephrase that however you want to. What I'm trying to get at is, I know this might seem weird, and in some way I even like I acknowledge that it's weird. Like there's a sense in that it's weird. It's kind of unintuitive. But it's totally the smartest, most reasonable view. And I'm trying to say it's not an unreasonable view.
Right.
To give you an idea of how personal styles can vary here, I sometimes state this in different ways. Sometimes I'll say, like, here's what's going on for me in my mind. You know, it may seem a little strange. I don't know. That's different than really weird. In my mind and my personal style, I'm like, and of course, I always have my, like, fetal development chart out. I only want to really, I don't like doing it without pictures. It doesn't make sense to me to do it without pictures. I don't know. And I'm always like, it might seem a little strange that I think that even from fertilization, it's morally equivalent to the toddler, even though it's not intuitive.
Yeah. I really like the word non-intuitive for this. Like, I think that really specifically gets to exactly what you're you're trying to say. And it's not like, it's kind of a long word. Like, I try to avoid using long words generally in dialogues, but like, that's not like a hard one to understand, like what that means. Like, I think everyone basically knows what non-intuitive is.
I think
Am I
that's
wrong?
great. I think
good.
that's a perfectly fine alternative. I'm not going to change. Because like I've been doing this for years, and it really works for me every time that I do it, and it's not creating confusion, and it's what's natural to me and my personality. And we've had various conversations about things that some of us do, oftentimes me, that like doesn't seem like it gels with y'all. And I'm a really, really strong believer in people are gonna have personal styles, and so there's some kind of a line somewhere where someone's gonna say, "Oh, personal style." It's like, no, it's just a bad move. And saying I've got a really weird view, I think falls in the this is personal style. And if like watch someone in a conversation. Like, part of what's going on here is like people are watching the course video. This isn't, you're not watching like an organic actual conversation. You're not seeing the ebb and flow in the rapport. And I don't know, it's one of my things.
So if this doesn't feel natural to you to say it like Tim does, like, just
say it however you want.
Don't say it like Tim does.
Right.
What you do need to recognize is it is a little bit of a shock for pro-choice people who just haven't thought about this in the same way you have. Realize that what you're saying is a little strange.
Yes. And I think it's good that Dad pointed this out, because I think there is a danger in our material of too much of my particular personality coming through and how we're teaching people to say things. And I think this is a really good example of that. So I think if at some point we were to like redo the video, I would totally change it for the video. Like as a, here's the thing that everyone should say, like, no, that's the thing that Tim says. It kind of works for Tim.
Right.
But probably not the best thing to like suggest that everybody says.
Right. All right, someone, and I don't know where, because this is just on the podcast topics document, and I don't know where this came from, but apparently someone at some point asked about how we should respond to overpopulation. Do you have any idea where that came from? It's like on the forum and the Facebook. Who knows?
Nope.
All right. So we respond to overpopulation. I can talk about this a bit if you want. In fact, this came up. You know, I've referenced the woman in the Denver airport a lot of times, and like also a lot of people have heard like different segments of this like long story that happened, but. A part of this I don't tell very often is that the very first thing that she said after I said, I help pro-lifers to not be weird. And she said, what does that mean? I said, I try to help us use more good arguments if you're bad ones and stuff like that. Her like instant, like, all right, like she jumped us into the debate by saying, well, there's this big overpopulation problem. You know, that was like her throwing the gauntlet down. She said, I'm pro-choice. And I said, why? I said, because of overpopulation. Because, and she kept using the word pragmatist over and over and over again. I'm a pragmatist, and I just understand that you've got so many people, and if you pro-lifers get your way, then we're gonna have even more people, and it's gonna be this like really big problem. My response, so this was before we had kind of worked out the ABCD kind of trot the toddler method that we're using at ERI. So like my move there was, instead of going instantly to trotting a toddler, I wanted like a short thing just to kind of get us going. I kind of want to surprise her a little bit. Like, this is kind of my first chance to say a pro-life thing. So as it goes into this whole, there's two ways, there's all these people and all that stuff. And I just said, why stop at birth? And she's like, what? And it's like, no, seriously, I agree. I don't want people to be hungry. Like, that's terrible. Like, we have this thing in common. Like, that's terrible. So let's really make a real dent in the overpopulation problem. Let's kill everyone that's like, let's say like 2 and under. Let's just wipe them all out, because that, like, you think abortion is helping with overpopulation, like that's not doing enough. Let's go further. And maybe like just once, like we're gonna do like what Herod did. We're gonna take it global, like that kind of like idea. Like we're gonna like really, really go after this, and then we can maybe then we can actually finally put a real dent in overpopulation.
Right. Set the reset button.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
And her response was, well, you can't kill humans. And it's like,
Yeah.
light bulb, you know, and I'm like, right, that's exactly what I'm talking about. I was like, this is what's going on for me. And then I basically did the describe the logic. You know, with overpopulation, you know, we're trying out toddlers, but it's like, there's a reason why, like when we were doing even JFA seminars before ERI, and then we were doing ERI seminars, like a lot of times, like, you know, when Tim and I we would, you know, Tim would almost always teach the try out the toddler section, and then we'd all split up into mentor groups, and we're mentoring people and, you know, role playing with them. Like overpopulation was often one of the things that we would bring up because it's a little bit tricky for the pro-life. Like the poverty thing is kind of like this basic 101 kind of version of it, where it's like, yeah, it's like just really straightforward. Overpopulation, you've got to figure out, oh no, you actually need to trot out like all the toddlers, you know, for this to become analogous.
The create a parallel situation is less intuitive for something like overpopulation than it is with poverty.
Right.
A parallel situation with poverty, well, you've got a poor newborn, you know, poor family with a newborn. Okay, well, but if you just have one person killing their newborn, that doesn't solve the overpopulation problem.
Right.
That doesn't put a dent in that.
Right.
I think that's where a lot of pro-lifers get hung up and struggle with that question.
This is kind of like when we try out toddlers for like back alley abortion. Like there's this other thing that we've got to do. We've got to do some modification because
little newborns are not dangerous to kill. Right.
The thing that I'm not doing almost ever is debating about whether overpopulation is like a thing. It's like it's like the same kind of big concern that pro-choice people think it is. I'm seeing more of the YouTube channels that are doing like education, and it's also entertainment. I've seen multiple channels cover this topic before, and they're not like coming from like a pro-life perspective.
Sure.
So it might be that we're going to hear this less and less moving on, but like, I really like something that Steve had told me one time. He was trying to help me figure out, like, hey, there is common ground you can have here, even if you don't think that overpopulation is a thing. Like, I remember there was a role, like, maybe the first time I was in a mentor session at a JFA, just like as an attendee. It's either Trent or Steve, and it's like, all right, find common ground. And I'm like, I don't have any common ground. Overpopulation is not a thing. Like, whatever. I don't have I agree with you about that. Like, I don't have this agree step. And he's like, all right, but what is their actual, like, concern? I'm like, overpopulation. They just did it. Like, are you listening? Like, no. What is their, underneath that, what is their concern? It's like, I don't know. Like, the people, like, will be too crowded and they won't be able to, like, eat enough. He's like, yes. That's their concern. Do you agree with that concern? Like, well, yeah. It's like, okay, say that. Like, you don't have to say you agree about overpopulation. You can say, like, I also want people to have enough food and resources. And we can talk about why there are areas where people have a really hard time getting resources and different problems like that. But even so, like, again, it's that thing where, you know, I think there is this natural impulse, and I've seen this after seminar after seminar after seminar, where the pro-life person, like, it's kind of like the thing when, like, you know, when the person says, like, no one knows when life begins. Like, we feel like, oh, we've got him now. I said this, like, this is not even philosophical opinion stuff. We're in, like, fact mode now, and they just said a false fact, and this is a chance to really, like, get a rhetorical edge that, like, will hopefully carry on, like, through the rest of the dialogue. Like, now I've got a rhetorical, like, I might know more things than you do, like, kind of a feeling in the conversation. So you want to be like, man, you don't even know about overpopulation. Like you believe all kinds of urban legends that are coming from pro-choice people. Like, don't do it. It's fine to just, like, agree for sake of argument. What if overpopulation is a thing? Like, just for sake of argument, you just, like, and literally say, like, you're not saying you agree with it. Just, like, for sake of argument, let's just say you're right. I don't think that justifies abortion, and here's why, and kind of move on.
And that's not even really why they're pro-choice anyway. Like, I mean, like, it's such an unnecessary rabbit trail. Like, you can refute. I mean, some of these things are very easy to refute, but, like, what is the underlying why they're saying it? That's the thing that like I want to get to. I want to get to moral principles.
Yeah.
I want to get to what's motivating them to be pro-choice, which is usually something emotional, or it's a personal experience, or their view about themselves, or something. And that's the thing that's actually causing them to be pro-choice. And they've heard from some random pro-choice person, well, the world's overpopulated, or no one knows when life begins. And they're just parroting that thing. You can squash that. And if you don't deal with the underlying problem, they're just going to parrot something else. They'll find something else to parrot. So it's definitely not usually a good use of time. I think I've had occasional conversations with someone who, like, they're so zeroed in on it. Like, they're not just parroting. Like, this is like, they're actually like, overpopulation is like their thing. And like, that's the thing they're worried about, because they're like looking, they're not thinking like tomorrow we're going to be overcrowded, but like hundreds of years down the road is like, oh man, at this rate, it's like this is their thing. Or, and like, that's fine. Okay. So for them, maybe you've got to spend more time on it.
That's a good point.
Most people, you don't need to spend time on it, which is the value of trot out a toddler.
All right, moving on. So Tim, this is a good one for you. So now that I've answered most of the last question, here's one where Tim's great on this. Talking to someone who believes in reincarnation. So you had this happen, relatively recently.
So
was that?
It was So it was
Winthrop?
like a little over a year ago, I think. We were at the Students for Life conference in San Francisco, and this came up from a pro-life student.
Oh, okay.
So the pro-life student came up to our table, and we're like, we got these pro-choice people, and they're pro-choice because they believe in reincarnation. Like, what do we say? It was like, they believe like in reincarnation. Yeah, like if you kill the baby and it comes back, so it's no big deal. Like, it's still gonna have a life to live. Like, it's okay. And it's this really kind of interesting experience, because it reminded me of like early pro-life days. I'll get back to that in a minute. My response to them was just to say, ask them if they think that it's okay to kill newborns. Like, aren't newborns going to just reincarnate too? Like, unless they've got this like super ad hoc, like only fetuses reincarnate, then I will grant you they can get out of the argument. But that's just a lame ad hoc nonsense deal. Like, why would anyone believe that?
Thinks only fetuses reincarnate.
I mean, people believe what they want to believe. I guess they could. Like,
Yeah.
I've seen more ridiculous views than that from people like sincerely trying to defend their pro-choice view.
I wouldn't even like blink an eye, honestly.
The girl who went through women's studies is like, I wouldn't even blink at a person who says only fetuses can reincarnate. That says a lot about your life and what you've experienced.
And to be fair, conservatives do the same thing. It's not just on one side, but people will choose to believe random things in order to justify their view. But unless they're believing something as random and indefensible as that, like, they're not being consistent. And talking with these students is like, the lights just went on, like, oh my gosh, this is the answer that they've been looking for. And it's a very simple answer. It's this thing that I learned early on in my pro-life days. We were doing Teens for Life at the time. We did a GAP project, a genocide awareness project, in University of Georgia, which I've been to a number of times. I went there with JFA too. The first time that I was there was with Genocide Awareness Project, and you and me, and I don't remember if anyone else from our group were there that day. And there was this interesting moment where there was this really loud student, and he was yelling, not like berating, but just like, he was very loud. It was high volume, and he was kind of frustrated. It wasn't like mean. He was just very loud. He was yelling loudly at this pro-life volunteer behind the barricade. I was outside of the barricade, and he was yelling at her like, "You're not giving me an argument. These are just pictures, and pictures aren't an argument, and I want an argument." And
like, you called?
Basically, yes.
Tim like skips over.
Yes, exactly. I skipped over. And so I walked over. I didn't skip, I promise. And I said, "You want an argument?" He said, "Yeah." And I said, "Okay, I'll give you an argument." And I gave him like kind of a basic pro-life syllogism, or at least I started giving him a basic pro-life syllogism before he cut me off. I said, "Well, I think it's premise one. It's wrong to kill human beings. Is that I'm going to stop you right there." And what then happened next? It was one of the weirdest arguments I think I've ever heard. It was
stop you right there.
Yes. He was arguing something like, well, we aren't even sure if we cut someone up, where is the soul? If I like chop off your arm, where's your soul? Isn't your soul like in your body? Well, like, we aren't even sure where the soul is. And so, like, maybe it's not wrong. It's not wrong to kill the unborn, because like they don't have we can't tell where their soul is. It was
What?
weird. He was saying it very confidently. Like, I'm not doing a very good
Yeah.
representation of it. But I don't think I'm giving an unfair representation of the logicalness of the argument. But my experience in that moment was like, I was like, I think I was like 19 or something, 18 or 19. This very confident, passionate, pro-choice philosophy college student was kind of intimidating. He was loud. He's clearly kind of used to being the center of like intellectual engagement.
Dominant lobster.
And yeah, very, very, very dominant lobster, Jordan Peterson reference. And as he's saying this, like, this is one of the weirdest things I've ever heard. And I didn't know what to say. And God came in and helped me out. Like, I truly believe this is like a God moment. This other pro-life volunteer, this older guy, came up and asked a very unhelpful question, but it gave me time to think. I needed like 60 seconds to gather my wits. What is wrong with this argument and figure it out? And this very, very nice, well-meaning person asked him, what crime has the baby committed?
Oh my
like multiple
gosh.
times. Not a helpful question. And the student was not happy about it either. But that distracted him for a minute. I gathered my wits about me and I said, okay, well, wouldn't that be a good reason to make it legal to kill anybody? Because you don't know where their soul is. And he said, well, I've got to go to class. And he ran off. But at that point, there was like a crowd of like 25 people standing around. And so then after he left, I explained to the whole crowd, here's what just happened. He's got a position that can't stand up if you apply it to anybody other than the unborn. And the whole the learning experience, this is kind of a long story. The learning experience for me was like, wow, crazy. What sounds like a complicated philosophical argument can just be responded to by trotting out a toddler. This is not how people handle their views consistently in terms of anything other than abortion. Trotting out like if you ever hear anything really weird and philosophical, my first move in my head now is, all right, trot out a toddler. And most of the time, it just responds to it, unless it's like some kind of philosophical argument against the unborn, which this was not. So in terms, I had the same kind of response to the reincarnation thing with those students, and I tried to explain to them like, this is what you should do in your minds anytime you hear a really weird argument: is just trot out a toddler in your minds and see if that solves it, because oftentimes it does.
That's really good advice. I mean, sometimes it can be just so intimidating that you don't know where to go with it.
Yeah.
And I think when you practice the like steps of trotting out a toddler, you need to be really comfortable with how to do that, because you're going to encounter situations that are sometimes seemingly so different than a normal circumstance. But if you understand the process of how it works in and out, then you can apply it to things like reincarnation or just wacky ideas about the soul or whatever. If it's not a utilitarian argument or an argument against the personhood of the unborn, it's going to work very, very well. Or at least it's going to help your conversation move
if
into...
If nothing else, it directs it.
Yeah, exactly. It directs
Clarifies
it into a place where you can actually engage.
So there's this kind of cool thing here where, like, I was just kind of internally processing. I kind of had a little bit of an inner monologue going on. But it's just like, I like that we're doing this because, like, you know, by this point, if you've watched the entire course that we've put out at this point and you've listened to all the podcasts, you've heard us respond to a lot of the most common pro-choice arguments. And I definitely know what it's like to get at least momentarily stumped by just hearing one that comes out of way left field. And I think it's like, so I love that, Tim, you've given this like principle, like generally speaking, like here's the thing to try just when you hear something that sounds kind of oddball is try a toddler, see if that works. I also like that we can kind of talk about some of these specific things. So I want, like, for you listening, email us your weirdest pro-choice arguments that you've heard.
Yeah.
Just so we can kind of talk about them and just help the people. Like, I know there are some people that are really quick on their feet. I'm not usually one of those people. I usually need a little bit of time to kind of internally process and figure out, and then, you know, and then get back. And so I know I'm not the only one, and so
you're better than most, but I mean you're no Trent Horn either.
Oh yeah. Trent's crazy fast. He's like, he thinks at light speed.
You're short selling yourself just a little bit though.
Okay, fine, but still, I know that like I am helped when I hear other people like, hey, here's like where I would go, like it like this the structure
ahead
ahead of time. You know, the more you sweat in training, the less you bleed in battle. Kind of idea. I have had some really strange pro-choice arguments I've heard, and we could add those to a future podcast of just what are the strangest pro-choice arguments you've heard? This is like the thing you've only heard once. It's so weird. So we can hear about those things and respond to them and kind of help everyone else, because it's not like only one person on this planet is going to make this weird reincarnation kind of an argument. Like you're going to hear that even if we don't hear it that often. So that's something that I'd be interested in doing sometime down in the future.
I'm totally down with that, and it's something that I care a lot about at a very personal level, because it's right out of our mission statement. Training pro-life advocates to think clearly. And a lot of our focus has to do with reasoning honestly, like the open-mindedness side of things, and arguing persuasively. What are the most persuasive arguments? But I don't want just that. I don't want to just like help people. Here's the arguments to think about. It's what is the way that you should mentally structure your thoughts to come to reasonable and clear conclusions. And I see this as kind of an example of that, and I'd like us to do more of that.
Okay, let's do one more question. So last night I did a webinar with Tina Whittington. We've kind of changed things where, for a while when we were doing the Students for Life ones, we're having like Tim and Rachel were all like involved, at least behind the scenes, and Rachel was helping answer questions. And we kind of figured out we don't need everyone doing this. We're going to be more efficient with our time.
Efficient use of job
So
time.
now we've given Tina a lot more things to do behind the scenes during the webinar. And anyway, so Tina and I did the first Just Josh Tina webinar, and it was great. A lot of people, Dank Pro-Life Memes was there. Thanks, nice. Elijah. We had a lot of good questions. But there was one question that I wanted to actually bring into the podcast. In fact, I almost texted you guys to be like, real quick bullet point ideas on this, because I literally had to spend basically 10 minutes of like the module is playing, just like, what do I want to say to this person? So I'm going to give you both the question and I'm going to give you basically what I said, just to kind of give you guys some processing time. But I'm interested. I bet I did not say everything that could be said by ERI staff on this question.
This also explains some of why you responded previously to like, man, like sometimes I'm not very fast on my feet.
Yes.
This is a very personal. This happened last night for you.
Yes. So I think it's a really good question. So this was from, I don't have the person's name. I've got her screen name on the chat last night, which was Pro Life Gal Forever. So whoever that was, her question was, he said, I have a problem with sarcasm. Do you have any tips? I usually get sarcastic when I'm trying to get my point across.
Okay, I thought she meant she didn't understand sarcasm.
No.
I don't get sarcasm. No, she has a problem.
She is a sarcastic, snarky person, and it comes out a lot when she's explaining herself or arguing, and she knows it's a problem and wants tips. So I'll just walk through some of the things that I said. So there's this kind of thing where as I began writing bullet points for myself, the first thing I wrote, I deleted. My first thing was, you need to have some self-control. But I took that back because I realized, like, I don't think that's basically just a Band-Aid solution. Like, you need to change your attitude about the person, or try to change your attitude about the person. Like, the attitude that's causing you to feel snarky, probably you don't have a very good attitude. Like you need module 1 of the course, like, really bad, probably, because they don't know what you know yet. Like, a person who's been through our course is now in 95 percentile range of where they are as far as like how much they understand, I think, both sides of the debate. It's not a full advanced philosophy course or something like that, but still, like, it's pretty,
it's a lot more than most.
It's pretty comprehensive. And so, like, you have this like really unfair advantage talking to most pro-choice people. And so it's kind of like to try to empathize. Like, imagine you're talking to someone who has studied the heck out of this other topic that you haven't really studied. Like, let's say like they really know the research on global warming. And then you come in and say something that like kind of makes sense to you, but you're at like the very 101, like you're just trying to work out the basics. They might actually be annoyed just because of the process that they've gone through. They have heard that thing so many times. They've probably seen it debunked in like 10 different articles or something like that, and now they're thinking of you as kind of this idiot. And have you ever talked to a pro-choice person who thinks you're an idiot, but like they don't say it, like they don't explicitly say you're an idiot, but you can tell because of their face? Like, you're not a good enough actor to think that this person's an idiot and have it not come across. So you need to change your attitude as part of it. So like, it's not just about self-control. Try to have some empathy for a person who might be processing their pro-choice thoughts out loud for the first time. And even that means, yeah, maybe they're saying some things that are stupid or annoying or whatever. Like, try to have some empathy, and that might help reduce like the sarcasm. And the other point that I made is, generally speaking, and we've made this point before on this podcast, that like sharp sarcasm, snarkiness is usually not going to be helpful. However, humor is a very helpful thing. So we're not saying be a total logical robot, you know, and you're doing a Rubik's Cube. It's great to add in humor. So listen, if you haven't heard our podcast episode on using humor in dialogues, I think there was like that. It's one of my favorite topics that we've ever touched on, because I've never seen anyone else touch on it. But it's like, yes, humor is great to bring into a dialogue, not snarkiness, not making fun of them, but there's other ways that you can be funny. And that does multiple important things. It shows them important things about you. And I'm not going to reiterate everything that we said in that episode. You should go listen to it. So that's a lot of what I said last night. I'm interested in you guys. Like, I think we all have a snarky side of ourselves. That's another thing I admitted last night. Like, I'm with you. I have a very snarky side of myself that is I'm repressing, you know,
Yeah.
or trying to repress and trying to not have come out when I'm in dialogue, because that's obviously not going to be helpful. I'm interested in what else you guys would say to pro-life girl forever.
So a little bit of internal Rachel here.
Okay.
I've gotten to the point in my life, I think I almost never use sarcasm. I think I'm naturally inclined to be a very sarcastic person, but this is one of the things I think I've kind of just beaten out of my language. I don't know. Maybe I'm totally wrong and I use sarcasm more than I'm like thinking right now.
Sure you do.
Sure you don't, Rachel, right? But like, I'm naturally inclined to want to be a bully. And that's the part of Rachel I really don't like, the bully Rachel.
What do you mean by that? You're
mean-
inclined to be a bully.
I mean, I'm inclined to be kind of a mean person because the one of the ways I think God's gifted me is like I see people very true to themselves. Like I can pick up on a lot of things about a person right away. And this helps me a lot at Outreach. I can tell what's really important to them. I can tell what's like sensitive in their life, which oftentimes helps me to minister and serve people.
There's a friggin' superpower at Outreach.
Yeah,
So
I don't.
superpower.
I do
So
not have this. I do not have this
and I'm
skill.
being totally transparent here. It's almost embarrassing to admit, but like this is one of the reasons I'm so good at Outreach.
Yeah.
It really isn't just because I've studied or whatever or practiced a lot, but like there's a double-edged sword here where because have this gift, I also can see right where to put that dagger and hurt another person. Like when I want to say
their
something
weak spot.
cruel,
Yep.
yeah, I don't say 10 cruel things. I say the one thing that you hate most about yourself.
Unexpected Mulaney.
Whoops.
Yeah, that's exactly what's in my head.
Oh, that's the thing I'm sensitive about.
High hit.
I'm sensitive about my high hits or whatever he says, right? It's like, totally. So,
Just so you know,
we're all thinking that.
so just so you know, if you're listening to this podcast, you should listen to all the John Mulaney, because this is now going to be a thing. We are going to be making a lot of references and not really explaining them. And if you want to get them, you should listen to John Mulaney. Okay, go ahead, Rachel.
So totally, like just as he describes the 8th grade girls, right? Like they find the one thing that you hate about yourself.
Yeah.
So I empathize with you, pro-life girl forever, or whatever your name is. But I think in overcoming sarcasm, at least in my life, sarcasm has been a coping mechanism when I feel uncomfortable about a situation, and Outreach is really uncomfortable. So if you're going into sarcasm mode, it might be because you want to do well, and like this is where it's being channeled. And so I think it's more than just the self-control, right? Just because you struggle with this, it doesn't mean that you just like are this out of control person, but you don't maybe have the tools yet to focus that energy into something else. And so I actually am going to suggest practice. Find some pro-life friends that are going to role play with you, and maybe have one person that's role playing and another person listening. Friends that you trust, and you are focused in on using the dialogue tips like we teach in Module 1 and
Module 2.
Yeah, and not using any sarcasm. And like they need to have a flag on the play where they raise their hand every time they feel disrespected or like you're using sarcasm or anything like that. And then I would say after you've kind of done that with your pro-life friends, do that with your pro-choice friends, and tell them, I'm working on respecting those who disagree with me. Will you talk about abortion with me? And if I am mean to you or sarcastic or make you feel like I think you're an idiot because I don't think that. If I make you feel that way, I need you to tell me, and I need you to tell me why. We hear pro-choice people say dumb things at outreach. I had a guy one time tell me that he thinks abortion shouldn't be legal in the 4th trimester of pregnancy. Okay, so he says that, and I go very like nicely. So there's 3 trimesters of pregnancy. And he's like, oh, I'm a total idiot. And I was like, no, you're not. You're not. You're just thinking about this maybe for the first time in this way. Is this like the first time you've ever talked to a pro-life person? And he's like, actually, yeah. I'm like, then you get a free pass. You can say all the dumb things you want. Can I get a free pass too? Because I might say some dumb things. And he was
That's
like,
fantastic.
sure.
Awesome.
It was,
Wonderful.
and then like the conversation
Rewind
went
the
really well.
podcast 30 seconds and hear that again. That
Wonderful.
was amazing.
So, I mean, that's the space we need to have, right? Like, it's okay to make mistakes. I'm sorry you're struggling with this, because it's really hard to struggle with it. It's like I think it's a personal thing. And so thanks for asking the question.
Well, I want to ask a clarification question.
Sure.
This could sound like a challenge question. It's not intended to be. Do your kind of decision to try to root out your sarcastic side of yourself, is that something that you see as personal calling, something that like really you need to do given your superpower and everything else, or do you see sarcasm as like this process that you've done really everybody should do?
So I do see the sarcasm and like the mean bully Rachel as being a little bit separate things, because I don't think sarcasm is always like dark natured. I think it's like dark humor, like especially sardonic humor really appeals to me. So I see them as being separate, but the bully Rachel, I think everyone needs to root out their maybe cruel tendencies. Sarcasm, no. I think there are some people out there who could be really sarcastic in a good-natured way. I think my sarcasm is like a coping mechanism that I need to channel into other things.
It's not very good for you.
Yeah, it's not good for me. So I think the sarcasm, personally for me, for this pro-life girl, in her abortion conversations, the sarcasm should be rooted out.
Yeah.
But not like in her conversations with friends. But I don't even try to use sarcasm with friends. It just sometimes it doesn't land, and there's a miss. So that's a personal thing.
Like if sarcasm comes out, it should definitely be on purpose. Like I read Pro-Life Girl Forever's questions. He says, I usually get sarcastic when I'm trying to get my point across. Like this is just happening. Like it's just like the way she talks. Like there was actually, like, I don't remember where I heard there was someone, it was maybe a stand-up comedian who like did, or it might have been a YouTuber, but they did like a little skit on like the person who sounds sarcastic all the time, like everything they say sounds sarcastic, even though they're not trying to be sarcastic. I think it might have been College Humor, but like someone does like where everything is like just has that tone and it's ridiculous and kind of funny. Like that's more like what's going on here. And so she needs to like exercise this demon out of her, kind of a thing. And like it might be that every once in a while, maybe not with pro-choice people, but like my wife and I are sarcastic with each other, and it's fine because there's enough trust there. We know we're not actually being mean to each other, and we're just we both have kind of dark, edgy, sensitive humor, and it's kind of like that. Like you hear like when comedians talk, like they want to make each other laugh, but to make each other laugh, they got to go super dark, like just like we're like stuff that you wouldn't usually say on stage because that's the kind of thing that'll actually get a comedian to laugh. That's a little bit just going on with my wife and I. Like we have to go pretty edgy, and I would never do that with any of you guys. Like just because we're trying to make each other laugh, and there's enough rapport there. Like yes, sometimes it's okay but you got to be doing it intentionally because otherwise you're out of control, and that's where a lot of the really bad stuff's going to happen.
I think that's a really important observation, Josh, because I think your rapport level has a lot to do with your safe sarcasm level.
Yeah.
These are corresponding things.
Yeah.
And so when you're in a conversation with someone that you're not that comfortable with, humor, again, is different. Humor is fine. Sarcasm is riskier. And in general, you don't have the kind of rapport to pull off sarcasm in a way that's safe because you don't have trust. And trust kind of comes as you build a rapport and spend more time building a relationship. So I think that's a good reason to not be sarcastic at outrage or with a pro-choice person in general. My main thought is very much in line with what you said, Josh. I think it sounds like the internal stuff is the thing that I'm the most interested in. And so one side of that is it sounds like probably arrogance is an issue. I don't know, pro-life girl forever,
Right.
or for forever, or whatever it is.
Forever.
In my head, it was the number 4 ever. I don't know if that's accurate.
It
but-
might be kind of the way that I said it in kind of a funny way the first time.
So, I don't know the person, so I can't judge the person. But I think someone who is telling me they have a problem of just like subconsciously what's coming out in their tone of voice is sarcasm when they're talking to a pro-choice person about abortion. I would guess there's an arrogance there, and they need to think they need to rework their hearts to be more charitable towards the other person. So I think module 1 is a really good place to start there. There's another side of it that I think I want to just point to briefly, which is I wonder if this person has a lot of negative experiences with talking with pro-choice people and has become cynical.
Yeah,
I think
that's really good.
Cynicism and sarcasm, I think, have an interesting correlation.
Yeah.
And so if I'm not barking up the wrong tree, then plausibly what's happened here is there's a lot of hurt or frustration or some combination of the two from past experiences with pro-choice people. And those bad experiences haven't been very well worked out. And as kind of a coping mechanism for those hurts and frustrations, just kind of like dishing it back at new pro-choice people. If that's something that's going on, then not only do you need to try to change your heart and how you're thinking about pro-choice people and trying to deal with possible arrogance issue, but also like try to resolve these past hurts and move on from them.
The only other thought that I had was there also could be a thing that could happen for some people where, like, if you listen to either a lot of stand-up comedy or you listen to like a lot of like Jordan Peterson or Ben Shapiro, like people doing like Q&As where they're dealing with kind of hostile audience members, that can end up having a negative effect on you if you kind of start like just like ingesting like that kind of model. Like Tim wrote a really, I think, important piece for the blog. This was one of the most like read pieces last year on like you kind of analyze this viral Ben Shapiro video, and like we don't hate Ben Shapiro here. I listen to his podcast a lot. I agree with a lot of the things that he says. We have different approaches certainly, but like I'm
fine with the way that he debates. I just don't want people to dialogue the way that he debates.
Yeah. And so there's a thing where like if you listen to that all the time, you might end up kind of like instinctively going into that mode even when you're dialoguing with people. Like you're trying to think of what's the witty thing that I could say here that like if there was 1,000 other people here would get like a good laugh.
You're
like
channeling Shapiro or something.
Yeah, like that's, and so like be careful about what you're listening to. There's a relatively not as famous stand-up comedian, like his entire YouTube channel is basically him dealing with hecklers. Like that's kind of his thing. And I've watched some of them because like they're funny or whatever. Like, and I'm not real quick on my feet. So it's like, I like watching other people who are, or I don't feel like I'm that quick on my feet, I guess. I don't know what to do with that. I don't know. But I don't feel quick on my feet.
I think there's certain kinds of things where you're not.
That's fair. I have my moments, but like, I generally would like to be like, I would like to be able to do the things that I've seen people like you do sometimes where like you come up with a brand new thought experiment right off the fly. And it's just like, I don't know how you do that. It's cool. And so like for me, I like to watch that stuff, but certainly I need to be careful. But even like, and I have said this before, like, so if you listen to like a lot of like Rush Limbaugh or Matt Walsh or like people who like just generally when they talk, the what you're getting from them is we are all really smart. And they, whoever they are, leftists or whatever, are all really dumb. That's going to affect you badly. Yeah. And you need to be really careful what you're ingesting. Because if, like, just listening to just Rush Limbaugh, for example, it wouldn't surprise me if that person then went out and did their first outreach and are just naturally kind of sarcastic and just kind of naturally have this kind of attitude about all the people coming. And to be fair, and I've been that guy. Like I totally get, I've been the guy who I'm there at Gap or whatever, and I'm seeing pro-choice people come, and I'm like dumb person. Like in my head, like that's like what's like I'm let's hear your dumb pro-choice arguments. Like I'm being a bit, I'm exaggerating a bit. It's not literally like that, but it's that kind of thing.
Sure.
I'm not taking people seriously enough, so I know what that's like. So I just want to encourage people to pay extra attention to what you're taking in. It's fine to take in some things like that. I listen to some Ben Shapiro because I want to have some sense of like what's going on in like, the world, and I'm not paying attention to the news a lot. So it's kind of like one way where I can kind of fairly quickly get a sense of some of the things going on in politics, and it's fine. But if I listen to too much Ben Shapiro, like that could have a negative effect on me and make me feel or come across maybe like more smug or something like that, like something that I would not want to come across. And I don't think that's mean to Ben, because I've heard Ben Shapiro criticize himself. Like he's admitted he is too smug. So like that's not I'm not putting the guy on blast. I'm just saying I need to be careful about that and be like, I'm glad that Ben Shapiro has said that he's too smug, because then I'm extra aware. Okay, he's kind of smug, and like that's like part of my process as I'm listening to him. So just be like extra aware, I guess, is basically what I'm saying.
And one more thing that I'd like to say is, and this might sound like prosaic or something, but pray. Ask the Lord to help you change your heart.
The other thing is you might need to take a break from Twitter or online.
Yeah.
I'm sorry to go back to the
Just take a break from all the things.
Take
We're
a break
not doing
from...
This is not social media part 11.
I know. I'm just saying.
But it's true. It's a very,
breeding
very
ground.
good point.
It's a breeding
Very good
ground,
point.
and it's contagious. The snark and the sarcasm.
Absolutely.
So that might also be something that can help if you take a break from it, step back, and then come and
Have
read
more
back through things you've
in-person
written.
interactions.
Yeah.
No, don't just listen to debaters, and don't just read debating on social media. Like these are not the kinds of things that are conducive to your mind being in a charitable place when you're talking to an actual human being.
Exactly.
So basically just take a break from all the things to become a better person.